X square, X square. And it's like it starts off slow and then it just starts coming out like in like a wave. Like there's no pauses at all. And you
Oh
just
my
have to do this
god.
button tapping. And it's like a PS2 game. So obviously the dragon's hitbox is like way bigger than it should be. So the ring just like barely
Oh
touches you and you're
no.
dead. I remember specifically even having my friend come over who I knew was like really good at video games, just be like, dude, can you help me beat this thing? He couldn't beat it. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Red Essence Games podcast. I'm Nick,
I'm Paloma.
and we are lifelong gamers as well as video game developers. As you could probably tell if you've been watching us the past couple weeks, Armand is not with us today. He's on a little vacation. So we have Paloma filling in for us. And Paloma is actually one of the other artists on our video game Traveler's Refrain. And if you haven't heard of Traveler's Refrain yet, it is a video game about a wandering musician who is trying to get back to his long lost love. And he ends up discovering this magical forest and all this crazy stuff happens. And if you're into like old school kind of RPGs, action RPGs with a modern flair, then Traveler's Refrain will definitely be for you. And it's something that you can go check out on Steam now in Wishlist. That would really help us out. But today, what we're going to be talking about is boss fights and memorable boss fights. So that will be a really cool one. Paloma and I actually have like a lot of overlap in terms of our gaming experience. So I think we're going to have some fun discussion with this one. But before I get into that, why don't we just kind of warm up a bit? And why don't you tell us like what's your favorite game or one of your favorite games?
So first one that comes to mind is definitely Bloodborne.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
What do you like about it in particular?
A combination of things like the art direction
Definitely.
and the boss designs
Yeah.
are really memorable to me.
Yeah. Do you like raging at games or?
I don't like raging. I don't want to talk about it. I can get really frustrated for sure.
Yeah.
But it's funny because once I finish the game,
Yeah.
I look back on it fondly, even though it really frustrated
For
me.
sure. And it's funny too because like we talk about some of these new games we play and you just like blow through these things somehow. And I'll be like hung up on a boss and you're like, oh, I beat him like 6 bosses ago.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, difficulty is so Bloodborne is probably my second Dark Souls game.
Okay.
Elden Ring was my first, so
Yeah.
I was still getting used to just how difficult these games were.
Yeah. I think Elden Ring's like a good like jumping off point as well. It kind of teaches you everything that the previous ones had taught you.
Yeah,
So when you go back to them, you kind of have a better idea of like how to approach them.
for sure.
So yeah, I mean Bloodborne, I think actually in terms of all the Souls games, that's my favorite one. And I think it's because of the aesthetic more than anything.
Mm-hmm.
I love that like gothic look and like the werewolves and vampires kind of thing.
Yeah, it's great.
It's
Cosmic horror.
Yeah, cosmic horror. Oh my god, it's epic. And I feel like it's something that's not approached very often in games either. Like besides like Castlevania,
Right.
I don't know. Maybe it's some of my limited experience, but I can't even really think of any others.
I don't know
Oh
if you
my-
played Lies of P, but you could
Not
tell
yet.
it was heavily inspired. You could just tell it was heavily inspired by Bloodborne, and it's a really good game.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
it's-
one looks sick.
Yeah, it's one of the better. I would say it's one of the better Souls-likes out
Really?
there. Yeah.
That's
yeah.
awesome. Does it have a cool story too, or is
It does. I
Yeah.
think it really does, and I also think it has a great like art direction and really good boss designs as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the like it's got kind of like a steampunky like clockwork kind of vibe,
Yeah.
right? And it's weird that it's about Pinocchio. Like
Yeah,
who
I
would've
thought it was
thought?
awesome.
Yeah,
Like
it is
gothic
really cool.
Pinocchio or a dark Pinocchio.
Yeah.
So such a cool direction. So they really like were able to take their inspiration and kind of make it their own.
Yeah. And did you beat that one?
Yes.
You did? Okay. I might have to play that soon so we
Yeah.
can talk about that too.
Yeah, yes, please. I didn't get all the endings though. I got
Uh,
2.
okay.
So
So it's very much like a Souls game.
yes.
Got it.
But very challenging too.
Yeah.
Honestly, yeah.
Interesting. All right. I'll have to play that one so we could talk about it.
Yeah.
All right. So why don't we kind of get into the topic? So as we said, we're talking about boss fights and like particularly like memorable boss fights. So what makes a memorable boss fight? And I think it could be a couple different things, right? It could potentially be like just the aesthetic of the boss. You just
Yeah.
remember because it's like it looked cool.
I also, for me, just the cinematics. They make
Mm,
it really cinematic.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a combination of things. You get cinematics, you just have like strategy,
Hmm.
like just how you fight them. That can be really memorable,
Yeah.
especially if they have different phases and things like that.
Yeah.
It makes it feel like you're fighting a boss.
For sure.
Especially like Final Fantasy 16, it almost each boss kind of feels like a marathon in a way.
Oh my god, that game was nuts.
Yeah.
Those boss fights were like 20 minutes long.
I know.
I was like, how
But
did...
you know what? I didn't mind.
I didn't mind either, honestly. It felt like, I guess, have you ever played the Metal Gear games?
No, I haven't.
That game was the first game since those that had that kind of like extended cutscene thing going on. Like, I can't really think of any other games that just like, I don't want to say the cutscenes drag on because they're interesting, but they're just long.
Yeah.
You're just sitting there and you're just like, when am I going to play the game again, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, those boss fights. Do you have one in particular from FF16 that you really liked?
So I would say it would rank as like my top boss fight would
Okay.
be Titan Lost.
Okay, yeah.
When Clive is like running across like the map and you see just this colossal.
Yeah.
I think that was just an amazing experience. Yeah, my top boss experience.
That's
I would
awesome.
say. Yeah.
And I forget, man, it's like I feel like I've played so many games that I'm starting to forget like exactly how they went, but that one started with you like falling down the chasm, right? With the Titan, and then it ended with you running outside with him, right?
I think the running towards Titan Lost. Now I don't. It's been a while.
Yeah.
But
that was like the two parts of the same fight, right?
Yeah, I think that falling through the chasm came after
Oh,
the
did it?
running. I think.
Okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
I
correct.
think.
Yeah. But that's what was so cool too in particular about that fight is the fact that it felt like it took you on this journey.
Yes.
Not only was it a long boss fight and it had all the cool cinematics and the fight itself was pretty fun, but like there were so many different things that happened and in itself it told a story. So I guess that's one of the other things that I think constitutes a really memorable boss fight is like how either the boss fight itself tells a story or how a boss is pertaining to the story. Because there's other video games that I've played where like you get to a boss and it's just like it's just a wall, a barrier essentially to get through, right?
Yes.
Like if we're putting on our game dev hats, you know, a boss fight is essentially the test of what you've learned so far to conquer and then proceed to the next story point.
I would say that describes Souls-likes very well.
Yeah.
With Titan Lost, or with all of FF16, I mean, what I really liked about it was it didn't have to be extremely difficult to be a good experience.
Yeah.
With Titan Lost, I wouldn't say that fight was very difficult, but it was just like a great experience. Like I will remember that boss fight for like ever.
Yeah. And I think it was a good balance because I don't remember it being easy either.
Right.
But it wasn't like annoying.
Right amount of challenge, I think. Which I like. I don't really like a huge challenge where I'm literally just there for hours.
Getting pulverized.
Just losing my mind.
Oh my god, some of these other bosses we're gonna have
oh yeah.
Oh my god, a lot to talk about in that regard.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay, so like so what constitutes a memorable boss? It could be like if the boss fight's really hard, if it's really flashy, you know, if the environment's cool, because that's another one that we didn't really discuss is sometimes just the set dressing behind the stage can be memorable and awesome. And it's like, you know, the designers definitely put like that extra bit of love into the just like the stage you're fighting in, you know? So I think, that's definitely what makes a really, really cool boss fight. Okay, so speaking, we're already on the topic of Final Fantasy. So another one that came to mind that I know you haven't played yet, but if anybody's played FF15, I know that's a highly contested Final Fantasy game.
Why?
So actually, another boss fight that we're going to talk about is going to be the answer to that question.
Okay.
So there's a boss fight in that, and maybe this is something we can kind of discuss briefly as well. Is like what makes it actually a boss fight as opposed to an enemy encounter, or even a mini boss, because those are things as well, right? Like they're kind of like you fight one before you get to the boss as like a smaller test of your skills, I guess.
Right.
Because this one's weird, and I guess I can kind of explain. So the one I'm thinking about from FF15 is Adamantoise, and that's like a pretty standard Final Fantasy enemy. It's like the big turtle enemy, but in this game, the thing is literally as big as an actual mountain.
Ah, that's so cool.
It's
I love colossal
really cool.
bosses.
It's sick. So in the whole game, like you're on this kind of like road trip with your bros sort of thing, and you just start driving up to it, and you see like a mountain basically just like come out of the ground, and it's got a turtle head, and
Oh
you're
my
like, I know I'm
gosh.
gonna get to fight this thing.
That's crazy. How are you going to be this big and beat something
Well,
like
I
that?
know that's what's nuts about it is I think a lot of other video games, again, like talking as a developer, they do kind of tricks to make the boss feel really big. But in this instance, it's like the thing was actually as big as the screen, and they zoom out the camera, and Noctis is like an ant fighting it.
Wow.
It was nuts. So you kind of have to lock onto its eye, and Noctis kind of has like a floaty sort of attack system. So you're just up there just slashing. And this thing took 3 hours to beat.
3
I'm
hours?
not even kidding.
Is that like after dying many times?
No. It just is like a sponge enemy. Like it wasn't hard at all to fight it.
Okay, yeah.
But it's kind of like you just had to watch its moves, dodge out of the way, and it just the whole point of it was to be kind of like I don't want to call it like a meme boss, but like it's like we have a 3 hour long boss fight sort of thing,
Right.
But it was just memorable because I just was sitting there just like kind of doing the same thing, just kind of taking in the swell of the music, because that game has amazing music in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it was a really crazy boss fight.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so I'm really interested to see what you think of FF15 in particular, because it's very much like a bro game. You know what I mean?
Really?
Like you're with your bros, but it's another one of those games. It's like the power of friendship sort of thing. So that's what kind of drew me to
I like
it.
that though.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think you'd probably find the cast like endearing. But like I said, it's a bit contested, and we can talk about that in a bit. So yeah, I'm very curious to see what you think of that. So we might as well just keep on the topic of Final Fantasy, because again,
there's a lot to talk about.
there is, man. It's my favorite series. So, and I know you just beat Rebirth. So
Yes.
so no spoilers.
No spoilers.
But why don't you talk a little bit about some of the boss fights in that you liked?
Oh man. Okay. Well, there's some that I got pretty frustrated with, and
Really?
I remember telling you when I was playing Remake
Yeah.
that I was like not a fan of the combat system,
Yeah.
and I was having a really hard time with the bosses. But I think the bosses in Rebirth were a lot better of an experience. um, I don't remember all of the bosses like names.
Yeah.
But I felt like it was a good challenge. And as I got more used to how the combat is kind of supposed to be, because at first I really wanted to just play Cloud, and I didn't really
Sure.
have the patience to learn how everybody works.
Yeah.
Once you take the initiative to learn everybody, and you switch between the characters often, and you figure out the best way to use them, it's a lot easier to.
Yeah.
You have a lot better of an experience. Gosh, I don't remember the name of the big guy who like fights in the robot. I don't know if you've gotten there yet.
Oh yeah. It's man, what is his name? The little guy that's
Yes.
got like the wispy.
He has like yeah.
Right? Yeah. Oh my god, I don't remember his name either. But that was yeah, I forgot about that boss.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
It was one of those fights where I was sitting there and I was like, I cannot believe that this mech thing is so detailed and
Yeah.
has so many like moves.
Mm-hmm.
it was crazy. And then they do that shooting sequence at the end, the on
Yes.
rails thing, which is, it was kind of easy,
Yeah.
but it's still kind of like it led to an experience of the boss fight as opposed to just like you beat it and you're done kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that was cool. Yeah, I think just before we dive back into the fights from that game, like the combat system in general, it's like I love it because it is, in my opinion, the biggest cross between what a turn-based game and an action game can be. And it's really weird because it feels super strategic because you're having to learn the characters and you're having to really understand how the material works and how you can use that to your advantage. And what I think Rebirth does better, like you said, and maybe why you're liking it more, I think it encourages you to test out the other characters more than Remake did.
Yeah.
Right?
I think I would agree with that. And I like what they added to the system, the folios.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's cool. I think in the first game, you would just level up your weapons,
you
right?
just level up your weapons.
And they had their own kind of like a skill tree kind of thing.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, and the team attacks too. I think
synergy.
makes it. Yeah, the synergy attacks are really cool.
Really enjoy those.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm loving this game. I still haven't beaten it, so that's why we
man.
haven't been able to talk
beat
about
it so we can talk about
I know. I played a little bit the other night, so I got a little bit farther, but yeah, it's just a long game. It's like it's like 3 times the size of the first one.
Oh my god, the content just kept coming.
Yeah.
I didn't end up finishing it all, but I mean I finished the story, but not all of the content.
Yeah, it's crazy. So, yeah, without spoilers, tell me a little bit about how the final fight goes and like what you thought about it.
Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about like how the fight goes. So I guess if you don't really want to know anything about it, probably skip forward a bit.
Yeah.
But there is multiple phases.
Okay.
It's really cool. It's really cinematic. And there's like a interesting way that they design like the parties you fight with. You don't have control over it.
Okay.
And you have to make sure you have your materia set up before you jump into this because there's no break.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
The very last phase, I would say was I found it a bit frustrating.
Really?
Yeah, because I feel like with Final Fantasy and Remake and a little bit in Rebirth, it sometimes with certain bosses it kind of pushes you into a specific sort of strategy. And it's not always obvious like what it is.
Sure.
Yeah. I very often had to look up like how to approach like Rufus, for example.
Yeah.
Did
you use your assess?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah, but with the final boss, that's not going to help you.
Got it. Okay.
So yeah, you don't get any information. Yeah.
Interesting.
So yeah, it was a bit hard because it seems like you had to save up your skills, or else you basically get insta killed.
Got it. Okay, so is it does the boss run the death ability? Like, can you attach a what do you call it? Like one of those equipment items to not get insta killed, or is it like it would go past that?
It would go. You would just have to kill him before he does it.
I see. It's one of those kinds
I don't
of
think
things.
you can interrupt the boss.
I see. Because I know some enemies like can actually cast like the death spell that will just like wipe you out. That's something else.
It's like a thing that charges up. So like you just have to beat the clock.
Oh, okay. I see. That makes sense. Okay.
As far as I could tell, you could not survive it. I don't know if that's true for everybody, but I didn't see a way.
Interesting. Oh man, I can't wait to get there and see how that goes. Oh man. I think in the first one, the final boss also kind of split your party up into groups.
Which boss?
The final boss in Remake, right? Like you were kind of they kind of had like the teams like fighting different parts of the boss, and then they kind of reconnect at the end, from what I remember. So, and that's indicative of the original as well. Like there are moments where they split your team up into kind of like mandatory. So that also kind of encouraged you to want to always use everybody and level everybody up, because you could play a lot of the original Final Fantasy VII and only level up like your main characters, and then your other characters are just like screwed essentially.
Yeah, but
So
it was overall a really good final boss.
that's cool. Okay, all right,
Hmm.
that's good to hear, because like sometimes it's a disappointment, right, to get to the final boss and you're like, it's either just straight up annoying or like
Yeah,
not fun. The final boss in FF16, I remember, was pretty hard. At least
yeah.
I thought he was hard,
Hmm.
and it did feel like a really true test of your skills.
Yeah.
And man, I'm not remembering every phase of that boss fight, but I do remember there's more like a one-on-one kind of scenario, and that's another style of boss fights that I love, where it's like you almost feel like you're sword fighting somebody back and forth. Um, if you, I mean, again, we're gonna have to go into a little bit of spoilers, but so I guess I'll just preface. I'm gonna talk about the final boss for Tears of the Kingdom,
Hmm.
but I think it's kind of obvious who you fight in that game.
Right.
But there's the one fight against Ganon where it's just Link versus like Ganondorf, like
Hmm.
in his like human or whatever human form,
Yeah,
and that was kind of
it
cool.
was.
And I think Link gets like his sword like lights up and has like a beam sort of attack. Do you remember that? It like is glowing.
It's been a long time.
Yeah, I
I
know.
feel like I've played so many games since then. It's like such a blur.
I know.
But I vaguely can remember the fight.
Yeah. So that one was pretty cool, and going into the final fight of that game as well, the dragon thing, that's an example I think of. It felt very cinematic, but it also felt like one of those boss fights where it's like, do the three things and then you defeat the boss.
Yeah, yeah.
You know? I think especially Tears of the Kingdom had a robust enough combat system that they didn't need to do that style of fight, even though that's very traditional Zelda. Like,
Hmm.
find the glowy things and whack them a bunch of times, you know?
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Do you have any other examples of games like that? Are you into that kind of style of boss fight, or do you really like the, like, you're really fighting back and forth kind of combat?
Man, I do like the fighting back and forth combat.
Yeah.
Sekiro comes to mind.
Oh, yeah.
I have really like grown fond to parrying.
Okay.
And it's kind of funny because it takes longer to master, but I
Sure.
find it like so much more satisfying.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know if it's like spoilers to mention. I guess it would be spoilers. Like the very last boss of
Sure.
Sekiro, it's kind of like everything you learned so far, you have to put it to the test, like
Definitely.
to the maximum. Took me forever to beat that boss.
I think that boss took me more hours than any boss I've ever
Ever?
fought ever.
Oh my
Ever.
god.
There's one other one I'm going to talk about in a bit, but that guy drove me absolutely bonkers.
Like gamer rage.
Gamer rage, hardcore. I think it honestly, and I hate to say this in front of the camera, but like I kind of had to cheese him to beat him.
Yeah.
I did the thing like you can kind of just like circle him and like make sure he's not like, I think he was like shooting lightning bolts at you or something like that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. One of the earlier bosses, I think his name's Genichiro, and
I
he
think
was
that
with
was like
lightning.
the first
Yeah.
like major boss, right?
Yeah, he used lightning
Okay.
on you, and I think you had to learn from that boss to beat that phase of the last
Yeah.
boss.
And
Brutal.
that mechanic I think is what tripped me up the most, because there was a specific thing you had to look out for where you had to jump and parry
Yes.
in the air,
Yes.
right? And it was like barely any bosses in the game even use that mechanic. So it was like I felt like I didn't get to practice it enough, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But my God, that guy just annihilated me.
Yeah.
And everybody talks about in Elden Ring, what's her name, Malenia, right?
Yes, Malenia.
But the thing about other Souls games besides Sekiro is you have the opportunity to kind of just like level up. And it's
Mhm.
like if you're really stuck, you can find ways to fight other bosses, get new equipment, and like really build your person up.
Yeah.
But in Sekiro, it's like you just kind of hit a wall, I think, right?
Mhm. It's like very skill focused, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you really you can't dodge it. You can't like
Get around it.
spam dodge.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to. It forces you to master like
Yeah.
how you're supposed to fight.
Yeah.
And I really like, as frustrating as it could be, like I could still respect it because
I agree.
it's just based on how much patience that I'm willing to pour into this and to learn it all. Gosh. But I platinumed it.
You plat?
Yes.
I don't think I platinumed that one because I think that was one you had to go back. You had to do multiple run throughs, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
was not willing. I beat that game and I was like, I'm done with
It's
this
okay.
one.
I'm not willing to do Final Fantasy VII remake or Rebirth hard mode.
Really?
No.
I did. I got the platinum on remake, and it was. I actually I thought it was fun because it made you strategize outside. Like you can. I feel like Final Fantasy VII, the remake Rebirth, also has a situation where you can kind of just keep leveling up stuff to kind of pound through some bosses. But in hard mode, from what I remember in remake, is you you can't use items, and I think only the benches heal you.
Oh.
And I think I almost want to say that the benches don't restore your mana, your MP. So you have to manage that throughout
Oh
each
yeah.
chapter.
Oh my gosh. So you just have, wait, can you use potions?
You can't use any items. From what I remember, I'm pretty sure that's
Wow.
so you have to use skills that either will restore your MP
Wow.
or you need to use skills that aren't magic focused to defeat stuff and then save the magic for the bosses at the end.
That's a lot.
Yeah. It was
Honestly, I feel like I'd rather do Souls games than
really, oh man. I feel like the Souls games are just like I'm frustrated for such an extended
that's
period of
true.
time
Oh
that when I
gosh.
get to the end I'm like I'm done with this.
Gosh, with Final Fantasy, I had like, because I was so used to the Souls like combat style,
Yeah.
I like couldn't understand like why you had to take damage. Like it, like they say like taking damage is sort of like inevitable in Final Fantasy
Mm,
because it's like in a turn-based game that's inevitable.
sure.
So if if it's based on that system,
Like a lot of attacks you even if you dodge, you would still get hit kind of
yeah,
thing.
and
Yeah.
yeah, and sometimes you get stun locked to oblivion,
Yeah.
and I just like, oh, I'm like, oh, this does not feel good at all. Like, but you just have to accept it. It's just like,
Yeah.
how it is.
It's definitely just a different style of thinking as you're playing,
Yeah,
which is kind of interesting.
I think I'm like kind of a control freak when it comes to like combat because I want to feel like I'm building like skill when I'm dodging, to have the ability to dodge like any attack is like super satisfying,
Yeah.
which is like where kind of Souls games, can feel really satisfying.
Yeah, it's like Souls games teach you that mechanical skill, and there's definitely some of that involved in Final Fantasy VII, but it's more a strategic skill that you have to learn to really like master, especially with hard mode.
Right.
Um, so speaking of Souls games too, like you said, Bloodborne's like one of your favorite games of all time. I think
Yeah.
it's definitely one of mine. That's the only one I think I've platinumed because I loved that game so much. And I think if you do some save scumming at the end, you can platinum it in one go,
Yes, you
right?
can.
It's like you had to like back up your save to the cloud and then like do the other path at the end,
Yes.
right? So I did that and that was really cool. And I beat all the DLC for Bloodborne as well.
Yeah.
And Bloodborne in particular has a super weird parry mechanic too with
The gun.
the gun.
I think that was really cool. Like it
Yeah.
was super satisfying every time you get it right.
But I remember the window for that is so tight compared to
Mhm.
any of the other Souls games.
Right.
Right? So that's what made it like super difficult. And also all the enemies were really fast in that
Yeah.
game too, I felt like,
Yeah,
right?
it's a very fast-paced game that kind of
Yeah.
forces you to be aggressive.
That's probably the only Souls game as well that sometimes I'll just sit there and be like, man, I could replay Bloodborne. Like,
Yeah, I've platinumed that too.
yeah.
Yeah, the Souls games I platinum were Elden Ring, Bloodborne, and Sekiro, and I don't think I'm gonna platinum anymore because I
No.
have no patience for it. Maybe Lies of P, maybe
Yeah.
one day, but I don't know. It's taking a toll.
Yeah, I can imagine. They are like rage inducing. But I guess we were talking about really quick the final boss for Sekiro, and I think from what I remember, the way I ended up beating him was I was up all night, like way past my bedtime. I was like
Yeah.
out till like 3 in the morning or something like that, and I think I was just like I need to just take a break, and I think this I found this being a trend with some of these other really tough bosses that are very memorable to me, where I just need to go to sleep and then I wake up and I beat it in like one go.
It's so funny how that works.
Right?
It just like kind of like sits in your head for a bit,
Yeah.
and you come back fresh,
Yeah.
and you kind of like, okay, like I remember the movements of this boss.
Yeah. And I think what's particularly so tough about those games, not besides the combat itself, and this is something I talked to Armand about in another episode, but it's kind of like you can't take an extended break from those games because you like go back and you're like you lost all your motor skills somehow. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I feel that. Gosh. But
And
sometimes a break from those games is necessary.
yeah, but they're like all really long. Like if you play them fully, they're like at least 60-hour games. I feel like most of them. Sekiro, I think, was pretty quick though. It was like 30
Yeah, it
hours.
wasn't too bad, I don't think.
But I'm the kind of person that likes to kind of hop around with games, and because I think today games are also just really long in general. So I kind of like to jump around, but with Souls games, it's like I have to just stick with them. You
Yeah,
know?
they're super linear. Or besides Elden Ring, it's more open world, but
Yeah.
I like the linear design to most Souls games or Souls likes.
Yeah, I think I know you told me you had played a little bit of Dark Souls 3.
Little, yeah.
I think you should play the first one. I
Oh,
think you would
yeah?
like the first one. The first one has one of the coolest map designs I've ever seen in
Really?
any game because you know how Bloodborne felt very interconnected, but it still felt like there was kind of like different zones, and I think in the graveyard you could kind of port to the different like levels, right?
Yeah.
In Dark Souls 1, it's like the whole map is like very connected in a really weird
Oh,
way, and it's massive.
really
So
cool.
yeah, it was good. And also, I think especially all this experience you have now, if you went back to that one, you wouldn't find it super hard.
Mm.
I would definitely say it's not one of the hardest of these games. I personally think Sekiro is the hardest one that I've played. That's probably the hardest video game I've ever played in my
Really?
life, if I'm really thinking about it. Man. But one of the most memorable boss fights from Bloodborne was that first Hunter, Father Gascoigne.
Father Gascoigne? I
Yeah.
think that's how you say it.
Yeah. And that fight was epic because you're like in the graveyard. The whole thing is about like, the undead and stuff like that, and you're fighting just again, it's one of those fights where it really feels like a one-on-one
Yeah,
battle.
yeah.
And what's so cool about that fight is it really trains you how to like
Yeah.
understand the mechanics of the game. And now that I'm thinking about it, was he the cap before you can even start leveling? Because in all the Souls games, you have to get to a certain point before you can spend your souls. No, maybe it's
I think you can
before
spend
that.
your souls when you get them, right?
No, it's actually I think it's there's the bridge with the werewolves. Man, I sound so dumb,
Yeah.
but the bridge with the werewolves, and then at the end of the bridge there's that first big boss. I
Cleric
think
Beast.
is that what it is?
Yeah, it's that boss has like one of my all-time favorite OSTs, like the
Really?
soundtracks, yeah.
Oh, I don't remember it off the top of my head. I'll have to listen to it after this.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites. Oh my gosh. Such good music.
Yeah. That was the fight you had to get past before you can start spending your souls, I believe.
Mm,
Your
I don't
blood,
really
whatever they're
remember.
called. But yeah, Father Gascoigne was sick because it's like I remember dying to him
Oh yeah.
constantly. And then you think you beat him, and then he turns into like a werewolf thing, right?
Yeah, I think
He like transforms.
he morphs during the fight. Um, and I know there was this item you could pick up, um, and it was like a music box.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you could like play the music box because I think the story was like it was like father or he killed his family, like his daughter and his wife, I think.
Whoa.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I think that's what it was. But there's a music box, and I think that belonged to like his daughter, and you would play it, and like he would like kind of freeze up, like he covered his ears, and
What? I literally didn't even know this was a thing.
yeah, there's like a lot of cool little
Oh my God.
Easter eggs in there.
Yeah, I know of those things, but I feel like a lot of that just kind of went over my head.
Yeah.
Like I'm really into lore, but those games sometimes are so obtuse to me that I'm just like I'm not even gonna bother.
Yeah.
So I try to just like power through a lot of the stuff. The other boss in that again, this is like going back to that discussion. Are these even bosses, or are they kind of like mini bosses?
I don't know. Like, I guess some would consider like cleric beasts to be the mini boss, but I don't know. I would see Father Gascoigne as a boss.
Yeah. So there's this other hunter that was on the top of the tower that had like the Gatling gun
Yeah,
thing.
Jura.
That dude drove me nuts too.
I did not. It was an old Yarnum, I believe.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I ran through that.
Yeah.
Did you know you could actually like speak to him and
Yeah. I went up on the tower and if you actually try to, I think you can do like a pacifist thing with
Yeah,
him,
yeah.
right? Or you can fight him. I think I fought him.
Yeah, yeah.
And fighting him is hard.
Did you cheese? There's like a
forget.
way you can cheese him. I think like you have to like rush up there and like basically blast him off the top of the tower.
I don't remember what I did.
I think it's what I did.
Yeah.
Because fighting, I had trouble with all the hunters, to be honest.
Yeah.
They're really hard. Like I guess there would be many mini bosses, but they're really hard, especially when you're fighting like multiple.
Yeah. They're fast too. Like that's the thing. And especially with him, I think he had that one shotgun blast it like fanned out, right? And I think it would stun lock you and then he'd run up and hit you or something like that.
Oh man.
I think that's what made him pretty difficult. But yeah, the bosses where the programmer is like, we're gonna program this to annoy the player are just
the worst.
Oh man. All right, so okay, we talked about Sekiro, Elden Ring. Okay, I think there's a couple there's a billion Elden Ring bosses, but
yeah.
there's two in particular I want to talk about. The one is Margit, and that was the first like big boss.
I think
right?
it was the first official boss in Elden Ring.
And that was another one too that was kind of like a teaching you your
this is how hard this game is. I mean, we're just getting started, but this is just a taste.
Exactly. And I remember running in there first, thinking I had pretty much cleared the map in the game and just kept getting owned by this guy. And then I ran out and I was like, okay, maybe I just need to explore more. And I remember with that game, you just keep finding more and more and more stuff to do, which was really cool. But I think that was another boss. Like I definitely had to get to a certain level before I was even gonna be able to take 2 hits from him.
Oh, yeah. Gosh. Yeah, that was like Elden Ring was my first Souls game, so that was definitely like a wake-up call.
What class did you play?
Let me think.
Or were you like more? Were you?
Because I switched.
Okay.
I think I became like a dex. Like I leveled up my dex skill. Because I don't know if there's classes and is there classes in Elden?
I think you got to start with like I'm more of like a sorcerer. I'm more of a warrior or whatever. But I think you can start speccing into different stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So. Yeah. I always like playing like dual wield, like 2 blades. So.
That's sick.
People kind of have a lot of gripes with the rivers of blood, but I love playing. I love playing those. They're so fun.
Wait, are those the weapons?
Yeah, the weapons.
Do they like suck the life or something like that?
I don't think so, but they're just they leave a trail of blood like
that's sick.
And they're really powerful, and people really hated fighting PvP with people who would dual wield them because
Got
it would
it.
just tear them apart. But I think they might have nerfed them since then.
Gotcha.
But I don't really care about PvP, so I just like melted the bosses once I like got into more NG pluses with that
Yeah.
weapon.
Yeah, that was a game I got to the end and I was just like, nah, no more. No more for me.
Yeah.
I played like a not the heaviest sword, but like the middle, like I don't even know what you call it. Not the light sword, not the heaviest sword, the middle medium
Hmm.
weight sword. And then I spec'd a little bit into magic just so I had some kind of
Oh
ranged
yeah, I was
attacks.
Magic first. I
Were you?
played Magic first, yeah. And that was pretty fun, but I don't know, I enjoyed both.
Yeah. I like the flexibility too. That's the other thing that I guess kind of can make an interesting boss fight is like the skills that the player has to fight the boss with. Did you? I forget. Did you play Hades?
No.
Okay, you might like that game
Yeah.
actually.
A lot
That's
of people said
very
that our game was inspired, or they thought like it reminds them of Hades.
yeah. We definitely have like a similar ish kind of art style, and we're obviously very like action focused as well.
Yeah.
But that game is very fast paced and it's a roguelite. I always forget if it's a roguelite or roguelike.
Roguelike. Kind of like Souls-like, but roguelike.
Yeah. Well, I think there's two different versions. There's roguelite, which it depends on the type of mechanics, like what you can carry with you when you die. And then
Oh.
roguelike means I think that you completely reset
Huh.
everything every time you die. So chat, correct me if I'm
Yeah,
wrong with that.
that's the first. I never heard of roguelite.
Yeah. So either way, I don't know which one it is, but what's cool about that game is you're constantly shown different boons throughout your playthrough, and they give you different skills. So one might be like, man, this game I haven't played in a little while, but one might be like, I don't know, the AOE of your sword swing is bigger, or like you can dash multiple times or whatnot. So that's kind of interesting in terms of the boss fights themselves because certain abilities that you get in your run through will make the boss fight way easy
Oh yeah.
or like almost impossible.
Mm.
And I believe there's also ways to I think after you get through the first like full run through to kind of inhibit yourself from the start, which makes the boss fights really hard, but the rewards you get to bring back to your place at the beginning of the game, the rewards are like bigger. So it's kind of like a trade-off thing. But I think especially you as somebody who's really into like the action stuff and like,
Mhm.
just yeah, the quick, fast-paced fighting bosses sort of combat thing would love this game.
Okay,
Yeah.
Hades, right? Okay,
Yeah, it's a
noted.
super giant game.
Is it on PS5?
Yeah, you should be able to
Okay.
get it on I think anything. I think they just put it on iPhone even.
Oh,
Like,
really?
yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I don't know how you would play that game on your phone,
No, I
but
wouldn't.
yeah. I actually got introduced. This is such a tangent, but I actually first played Bastion, their first game, on
Mm.
my iPad. I think I was going on a road trip and I had an iPad and I was just like looking through the games catalog and I was like, "Oh, this looks cool." And I played it and was just like freaking blown away by
Yeah?
that game.
Okay.
So,
I've seen that game. I haven't played it.
they're all good and they're all except for Hades. Hades is a very long game because it's got the repeat thing. They're all beautiful stories and very interesting,
Hmm.
mechanically as well as storytelling wise. So I think you'd love them, especially with the type of game we're building. Like
Hmm.
you'd see some cool inspiration.
Yeah.
So um so yeah, I think we also can't, if going back to Elden Ring, we can't talk about this without talking about Malenia, right?
Yeah. Oh
Like
my gosh.
that's the one
The
everybody talks
waterfowl
about.
dance attack. Gosh. I never mastered how to avoid that attack. It seemed like partially luck.
Yeah.
Like I would look up on YouTube like how people are avoiding this attack and I could do it sometimes, but not all the
I
time.
remember that too. I think I also had to look it up and I think I got the hang of it. I think in the run that I actually beat her, I was able to avoid it the couple times she ran the attack. And that was the only way I could beat her.
Mhm.
Because she gets to a point where she starts restoring her health, right?
Yes. Or no, she restores her health by that attack, I believe.
By hitting you, right?
Yeah, I
Oh
think.
my god. I
Yeah.
think you're right. Yeah, she like sucks your energy out.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So that was a brutal fight, but surprisingly, I still don't think that, for me at least, was as hard as the final Sekiro boss.
Really?
Yeah.
Hmm.
I don't know. I don't know if it was just my build, or like we were kind of saying, like you can kind of level up to a certain point where you're like, okay, I have a certain amount of defense and attack that I could just like wear her down.
Hmm.
But yeah, that was really hard. So so jumping off of that, in terms of super hard memorable bosses, I do have to tell you about another one.
Oh, okay.
I actually have two more for you that like we're like, and I'm not a rage gamer. Like I don't like lose my mind really. And I think it's partially due to the fact that I would consider myself a pretty good gamer at these kinds of games, but like some of these bosses just
Oh, yeah.
made me crazy. So in Final Fantasy VII Remake, if you do the hard mode run through, there is a secret boss, and I think you know how Chadley has his little like VR thing.
Yeah, yeah.
You fight him in there. He's like the final guy
Really?
you
Wait, in
fight
remake?
in Remake. Yeah,
Interesting.
you have to play hard mode in order to get to him, and it's like it's one of those bosses where you have to 100% like level up all your characters. So I think the cap was
Wow.
like 50 in that game, I think.
Interesting.
But this dude, it's like I had to watch a YouTube video and go like frame by frame in the YouTube
No.
video
Oh
to
my
find out.
gosh.
And there's a very specific strategy that everybody was online was using, to the point where it's like, if you don't use this specific strategy, I didn't find one
I
video
don't.
of somebody fighting him a different way. So there's this
I'm not a
material.
fan of that.
I know.
It pushes you into one strategy. I
Yeah.
don't know, man.
I know, it didn't feel like a test of my skills at all. It just felt like a do this and you might be able to
Yeah.
defeat this guy. But it was so funny because you have to equip this materia to Tifa. I don't know if you ever, it was like the dodging materia, and she normally does like her little like roll thing, but in this one she slides and it's fast. So you had to use
Oh.
Tifa and kind of like skirt around this guy.
Oh my
And
gosh.
you know how Tifa can build up her build up their stagger
Yeah.
really quickly? So the strategy was like using her to keep building up the dude's stagger
Mm-hmm.
in order to just wear him down. And oh man, I don't want to get this one wrong either, but I want to say he also, either he's one of those bosses that starts restoring his health, or he gets to a point where he just does like kind of an oblivion kind of attack. But I remember I would get him to like this little health, and every time would just
No.
annihilate me.
I've had so many. Oh my gosh. Last boss in Final Fantasy Rebirth got to the point in the last phase where he couldn't even see his health anymore.
Oh
And I just needed like one more hit.
no. Yeah. And you're just like running around the field like panicking, like, please don't hit me, please don't hit me.
Oh my god, I was like this. I was just like so frustrated.
That's amazing.
Oh, I
It's
could
funny
sympathize.
because in the moment you're like, you start to feel this sense of panic because you're like, I'm never gonna see the end of the game, or I'm never gonna beat it, you know? Man, that actually just reminded me. Okay, I actually have two more bosses for you.
Okay.
Okay, so the next one, we're going a bit old school with this one, but I know you've played Drakengard.
Oh, my first one, yes.
The first one, yes. And that is one of my favorite games of all time.
I got that game from Blockbuster. That's how
awesome.
long ago I played this game. I think I was in middle school.
That's awesome. It's an absolutely amazing game for anybody that's interested in super duper effed up games. And I think
It's so dark.
At some point we got to just do a podcast episode that's just about effed up
my
games. And this
gosh.
would definitely be in there. But so in Drakengard, you get to this point, and just to do a basic overview for people who don't know about this game, but it's a Yoko Taro game, and it's kind of somewhat connected to the Nier franchise, which we also love. But Drakengard is, you play like this warrior, you can fly on a dragon. It has a really interesting mechanic, but it starts getting really weird, man. Like you get to this point where you're like having to kill like giant floating babies.
Yeah.
And then this is okay, spoiler warning for like whatever, maybe 20-year-old game at this point. But
Mm-hmm.
if you get all of the weapons, you get to the secret ending, right? And Kaim flies with his dragon through a portal into modern day Tokyo.
Yes.
And the mother of all the floating, creepy babies goes through this portal and is just like frozen in Tokyo. And you proceed to do a boss fight where the dragon is just like flying around the mother and she shoots out these rings. One is white and one is black. And I think it's like X or square or something like that for the buttons. And you essentially have to play a rhythm mini game suddenly.
Yeah, I heard it was, you told me it was really hard.
It's hard to the point where I still haven't beaten it to this
Really?
day.
I still never got all the weapons to unlock that ending. I still have my PS2. Should probably do it one day.
It's probably worth it. I'd be interested to see if you can get it because it's like it starts off you're like square, whatever, x square, square,
Oh,
x square, and it's like it starts off slow and then it just starts coming out like in like a wave, like there's no pauses at all, and you just have to do this button tapping. And it's like a PS2 game, so obviously the dragon's hitbox is like way bigger than it should be. So the ring just like barely touches you and you're dead. I remember specifically even having my friend come over who I knew was like really good at video games, just be like, dude, can you help me beat this thing? He couldn't beat it either. So to this day, one of my favorite games I still have not been able to like fully complete, which sucks. So but it led for another memorable experience, I guess. So
would it be a spoiler to say that ending led to another game?
I think maybe, but let's just say, yeah, there's a connection to Yoko Taro's games.
Yes.
Which is really, really cool. So yeah, if you're into like lore and like going down the rabbit hole, like that is the coolest franchise to do that with, in my opinion. Yeah, so there's that game. And I have one more game. Going back to earlier in the conversation, we were talking about why FF15 is contested. So, one of the hardest bosses, but most memorable bosses I've ever played is in Kingdom Hearts 3. Again, it's like the final super boss that you have to fight. And I almost think you can only access him in the DLC. So that's the other thing that's crazy is like, you know, people were already kind of meh on Kingdom Hearts 3 for whatever reason. I liked it. But yeah, then the DLC comes out, which kind of is setting up the future of that entire franchise. And you have to beat this guy to understand what they're doing with the story. That's what's nuts with it, right? So, the guy that's behind Kingdom Hearts is Tetsuya Nomura, and he was also the concept artist for Final Fantasy VII, and he's also the director for Remake and Rebirth. And he also started designing FF15 and the world and the story. And I don't know about you. I don't know. Yeah, we still haven't done like a most impactful game kind of topic yet, but one of the most impactful moments in gaming history was when in high school they released this trailer for what was Final Fantasy Versus 13. And it was supposed to be connected to the Final Fantasy 13 universe, but it shows this dude in all black. He's walking down these stairs and there's all these knights like firing at him. And he's like teleporting with his sword, slashing. There's like blood everywhere. Wow. And, you know, we just beat FF16 and now we're like, oh, we got to just play an M-rated Final Fantasy game. But back in the day, it was like this was totally unheard of for like a very dark vibe in the Final Fantasy, you know, ecosystem. So he's like running up walls, like shooting guns. It's like crazy. And then at the very end, he sits on this throne like this in this super badass way. And that was like our taste into this world. So we got that trailer. We got a couple other small trailers. And we were like, me and my buddies were like, this is going to be the best game of all time because they were dropping all this lore for what the world would be. And I know we've had discussions about games like 16, and that's what kind of drew us to those games more than anything. It's like this deep, deep universe, right?
Yeah, I could talk about 16. So many different things about it. It was just, I loved it.
Yeah. So it's like I'm totally on the same page. So I know if you had been like into this back then too, you would have been so into the idea of this world. And they got to this point where the development was like taking forever. And then I remember this one trailer where they showed Final Fantasy Versus 13, and then they like cut out the Versus 13 and just changed it to being 15. So what was supposed to be this compilation universe, kind of co-headed by Tetsuya Nomura, then turned into Final Fantasy 15. And I think because he was kind of spread thin, and I don't know, obviously the logistics of the studio, but I know he was working on Kingdom Hearts and stuff like that. So I think his attention kind of diverted to that. Another guy ended up taking over the 15 world and kind of totally changed all the things that all the fans thought was gonna be really cool about 15. So like, it wasn't it's not like super dark anymore. I mean, it definitely has dark elements, but like, the whole premise was going to take place in this city, and all these people like worshipped like this death god. It was like really badass, and it ended up turning into this like weird like road trip game that still is pretty deep, but like it just felt like it didn't have those story beats like 16 does, or 7 or whatever. So that's why if you play that game, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on it. But going back to the hard boss in Kingdom Hearts 3, okay, this is again kind of spoilers. You end up in the Toy Story world in one of the worlds, and it starts off with this CG trailer of these like Final Fantasy looking characters, like doing Final Fantasy stuff, and then it ends with the guy sitting in the throne like this, who very much looks like Noctis, and you're like, what is going on? And then it pans out, and it's like the toys in Toy Story are like watching this trailer on the TV.
Really?
And it's promoting a video game within the Toy Story world.
Interesting.
Okay, so stick with me here. So then at the end of this DLC, Sora gets to fight this guy somehow, and then they do another trailer where it's like, again, very reminiscent of FF15, or what was supposed to be FF15, because there's these if you were into this game, you knew the shots in your head. There's one where it's like he's like falling asleep in the car, and it was like shot for shot the same shot, but the different character, right? Super, super weird, but everybody's theorizing like, okay, he didn't get to make the game he wanted to make, so now he's kind of integrating that story into Kingdom Hearts in some way. So we don't know if it's just going to be an homage, or if this is actually going to connect now. But you actually get to fight this guy that is a video game character in the world. It's super weird. But it was another one of those battles that's like kind of like Malenia, or one of these other ones we're talking about, where it's very one-on-one, and you have to read every single move. And he had like 10 moves, so you had to memorize like frame by frame, like when he's gonna like launch his attack, when to dodge and everything. And Kingdom Hearts is not that kind of game. It's very much like you run up and you like slash things, you cast spells.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was another one of those fights where it like took me hours and hours of dying over again.
I never even finished the first one.
Oh.
So how old is the third one?
The third one came out, I think, like 5 or 6 years ago, maybe.
Okay.
And they do have a trailer for, like, it's like, again, a way too soon kind of trailer for the fourth one, because it's like we have no idea when that game will come out, but that's another series that I think you'd be really into. But it's like you kind of have to be like invested and be like, I'm gonna go along on this ride that I know is not gonna make a lot of sense, and So yeah, that was another one.
So Nick, what is your most memorable boss fight?
Okay, so I think after talking about all of these fights, it's definitely the mother from Drakengard.
Oh yeah.
Just because it was a boss fight that I never finished, it was so rage-inducing, and it was definitely during that time where like I was in high school and I was like, very affected by the games I was playing.
Yeah.
And just seeing this like giant frozen statue there, and then all of a sudden, after hacking and slashing for like 60 hours, I'm expected to do a rhythm mini game essentially to fight the boss. I think that one sticks in my head more than any of these, honestly. So
That's
I
a
think
good
that's
one.
mine. Okay, so do you have any other ones off the top of your head that you're kind of thinking about?
So we were going back to Bloodborne, like Abritas.
Mm.
There was like that was like the alien boss, and I remember having a really hard time with that one, especially because after I beat her, I somehow messed up my save files, and I accidentally uploaded an old save file, and I had to beat
Oh.
her again.
Oh no.
Oh, I don't even remember how that happened, but
Was that the one where she'd spawn the little guys that would run and
no, that was before Abritas, I think. Abritas was
got a
just like
picture of her, right?
one big alien monster.
I don't know
um,
why I don't remember this.
I think they called her like the daughter of the cosmos.
Okay.
Um,
Do you remember kind of how that fight went?
so she has these tentacles, and like a lot of it was just her slashing these tentacles, hitting you. Oh my gosh. And then eventually she would like summon, like, I think it was like these beams, and you'd have to just keep running. And she'd
I
also
kind of remember.
charge at you as well, which was really hard to dodge.
Yeah, I remember there's a couple bosses like that shoot those like little tiny beams and they kind of track you, and if you don't start running at the right time and manage your stamina, you just like stop and then you just get like annihilated, right?
Yes. Another boss in the Bloodborne DLC was Lawrence the First Vicar, I think is how you say it,
Okay.
which was basically like the cleric beast, but like on fire.
Oh man, why do I not remember this? Was that in the DLC?
It was in the DLC, and he
Wait,
was like in the chair, or like I think he was dead at first, and then I don't really remember exactly, but you get to fight him somehow, and he is like very flamey, and he had like a couple like phases, like
mm,
at like I think the first he was like upright and slashing at you, and then I guess somewhere in the middle he like crawls on the floor.
oh,
And
I don't really remember that one.
that's a good one, a very frustrating one.
It reminds me of there is another one in Bloodborne. If you want to platinum, you got to go through that like
Oh, the Chalice
the
dungeons.
chalice
I got help.
dungeon.
My boyfriend helped me with that.
Really?
Yes, because he was like, "I don't want you to face those bosses by yourself." Like they're like like bosses with a twist.
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh, they're
Do you remember
crazy.
there was the one that was like a dog that was on fire? Because that's the one I thought you were
Yes,
talking about.
there. I think my boyfriend mentioned one, and it was like a headless. I think it was like a headless like wolf or something like that. That he remembered being the hardest one for him.
I I think if it's the same one we're talking about, that was the hardest boss
Yeah.
in Bloodborne, in my opinion, because it had this one charging attack that like the window to dodge was so small, and it was one of those ones where you're like, I know I got this, but still it's hitting me, and I was at a super high level, but it would still just drain my HP every single time it would hit me, and I was just like, oh my god,
Yeah.
why?
Oh my gosh, the Chalice dungeons were something else.
Yeah.
There's so many, but it's creepy. Oh my gosh, they did
Yeah.
a really good job with that.
Yeah, that was a cool like kind of extra thing in that game. But
Hmm.
I feel like if I played that game again, I wouldn't even bother with those. It's just like
Yeah,
that was like a one-time thing
I
for
know.
me.
Yes, same.
Um okay, so one more boss fight that kind of goes back to your favorite one of the Titan in FF16 is
Hmm.
Baldur in God of War. I know you
Oh,
played some of God of
some
War.
of God of War. The
Did you
one,
get to him yet?
no, I don't
Okay.
think so.
So that fight is epic. It's like if anybody grew up watching Dragon Ball Z, that is like the closest you can get to like feeling like you're a Dragon Ball Z character, because you guys are like flying across the screen. He's like throwing him. Kratos is getting thrown.
Oh
There's
my
like stuff smashing and blowing up. And again, it's like we keep saying, and maybe this is something we can.
Wait, is that the guy who like appears outside of your house?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
You're all
yes, I did
tatted
fight
up.
him.
He's all tatted up.
Yes, that was
Yeah.
crazy.
Right? Yeah, and it was another one that just felt like it kept going on and on and
Yes,
on.
yes. Oh my gosh.
So That was a sick fight. I'm sure a lot of people that are watching, if they play God of War, that's like at this point, even though that was a 2018 game, it's starting to feel like that's a classic boss fight.
Yeah, I gotta hop back on with that
Yeah.
game.
Yeah, you have to. Those are some of the best video games I've ever played in my life. Um but I think maybe the way we can kind of end this is like, why don't we talk about, as game developers, what we think after, now that we've talked about all of these different boss fights, as game developers, what do we think is making a super memorable or super fun boss fight?
Hmm. I would say, like you already mentioned, environment, like or
Hmm.
just a really well designed environment that just matches like the lore or the story of the boss. Um, and I mean, the strategy, like I know I
Yeah.
said that already, but like the strategy of how you fight them is like can be a really huge, like memorable moment for sure.
Yeah. Do you feel like you're more interested in games that are really preparing you for the boss fight, or do you like when you're kind of having to craft your own strategy to fight? Because I definitely think there's very different
I
styles.
like it when it prepares me because it's like I've been building these skills,
Hmm.
right? Fighting these, enemies and mini bosses. And I like to be able to put them to the test,
Hmm.
but I also like to be able to find out like my own sort of way to beat them. Like I
Yeah.
don't really want to be pushed into one strategy. It's just like not
Sure.
very fun. Like I want to be able to figure things out for myself.
Hmm.
If I have to look it up, I'm like, oh man, like
Yeah.
that kind of sucks. But yeah, I don't know. I would say that would be my ideal
Yeah.
boss scenario.
I think for me, like I keep saying over and over, I'm just a sucker for like the one-on-one sword fight kind of vibe.
Yeah, I do like those too, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, that's been kind of, I think, a trend in remembering the boss fights I like. One more, I'm not going to explain the boss fight, but fighting Virgil in
Mm.
Devil May Cry, like in any of the Devil May Cries, it always feels like that. Like you're really just battling it out.
Mhm.
And I think that, you know, as a game developer, you definitely want to prepare your player as much as you can for the boss fight, but I definitely think what makes the boss fight the most interesting is you show the player, okay, here's your skills that you have to use. You get to decide what skills now you want to apply to the boss fight.
Mhm.
And that's kind of how we've been building Traveler's Refrain is Traveler has all of these different spells that he can use to fight the enemies, but they're kind of used in different situations. You can kind of combine some of those for certain scenarios as well. So when we were designing the boss fights, we really wanted to make sure that we weren't, like you said, just like kind of trapping the player into one
Yeah.
way of approaching it. So I think that will be fun for players because that's what's been fun for us. So,
Mhm.
we're kind of trying to design that way. Um, but yeah, in terms of in a personal sense, what I find satisfying is like the visual aesthetic. I think because we're artists,
Yeah. I like in a game, like when you approach a certain area and you're like, "Oh, this is a boss arena." Like
Yeah.
like that's kind of like how I view the like aesthetic, like
When the like opera music starts popping in, you're just like, I know I'm in for it now.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, I think yeah, the aesthetic, the one-on-one like sword fighty sort of thing, and just being able to like have the abilities before you and decide how you want to approach it for the fight.
Mhm.
So yeah, you have any other thoughts?
Mm, no, not off the top of my head. I think
Okay.
we talked about a lot.
Yeah, we did. We covered a lot. This was a fun one. So yeah, guys, thank you so much for joining us. Please like and subscribe. Subscribing will definitely let you know when we upload each week. We've been sticking to a Friday schedule as of now. And go check out Traveler's Refrain again on Steam and wishlist the game. And until next time, we'll see you guys later.
Bye.
Bye, guys.